The Girl and Time. I have a small watch shop in the city. The shop is old, but I love it. Every day people come to buy watches or fix their old ones. I sit behind the counter, fixing broken watches with my tools. The sound of ticking fills the shop, a soft and steady rhythm. It never stops. It never changes. The hands of the clocks move forward, second by second, minute by minute. I have spent years in this shop, watching time pass. One afternoon, the bell on the door rang. A young girl walked in. She looked about 16. Her hair was long and she wore a red dress. She did not stop to look at the watches in the glass case. She did not ask about prices. She walked straight to me with quick steps. Her eyes were dark and serious. She stood in front of me and said, "I want to go back in time." I was surprised. People come to my shop to buy watches, not to change time. I smiled and said, "Time only moves forward. No one can go back." But she did not smile. She pressed her lips together and looked at me with sad eyes. "I made a mistake," she said. "I need to fix it." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I looked at the clocks on the wall. Their hands moved slowly, always forward, never back. The sound of ticking filled the shop. Tick, tick, tick. Time does not wait. Time does not stop. Time does not go back. I pointed to the clocks and said, "Look at them. They only move in one direction." She sighed and sat on a wooden chair near the counter. She lowered her head and stared at her hands. "I wish I could change the past," she said. "Just one moment, just one mistake." Her voice trembled. The shop was quiet except for the ticking of the clocks. I took a deep breath. Over the years, many people have walked into my shop. Some were happy, buying watches to celebrate special days. Some were sad, bringing in broken watches that once belonged to loved ones. Some wanted to remember the past, some wanted to forget. But time does not listen to anyone. Time keeps moving. I looked at the girl sitting in front of me. She was young, but her eyes looked older, full of worry and sadness. She played with her fingers, twisting them together. The clocks on the wall kept ticking, filling the silence between us. I waited for her to speak, but she said nothing. She just sat there, lost in thought. I had seen this look before. People who wished for the past always had the same look. But the past is like a shadow, always behind us, never in front. After a long moment, she took a deep breath and said, "I hurt someone. I said something I did not mean. Now I cannot take it back." Her voice was soft, but I could hear the pain in it. If I could go back, I would say something different. I would fix it. She looked up at me, her eyes full of hope. "Can you help me?" I sighed and shook my head. "Time does not work that way," I said. "You cannot go back, but you can move forward. You can say sorry. You can make things right now." But she frowned. "It is not the same," she said. "If I could go back, things would be different." She looked at the clocks on the wall, watching the hands move. Why does time only move forward? I picked up an old watch from the counter. It was small, with a gold case and a cracked glass cover. "Because that is how life is," I said. A watch does not stop for anyone. Even if it breaks, time still moves. We can fix the watch, but we cannot fix time. I turned the watch in my hands, feeling its weight. What happened cannot be changed, but what happens next is up to you. She was silent for a long time. Outside, people walked past the shop, busy with their lives. The world kept moving. The sun kept shining. Nothing stopped. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "I do not know if I can fix this," she said. "Maybe it is too late." Her hands trembled as she spoke. I placed the watch back on the counter. "It is never too late," I said. "You cannot change the past, but you can change what comes next. Every second is a new chance." I pointed at the clocks on the wall. "They do not stop. They do not wait. But you still have time." She looked at me, thinking about my words. I could see the doubt in her eyes, but also a small spark of hope. The shop was quiet except for the sound of ticking, steady and endless. Time moved forward, and so did life. The girl sat in silence. Her eyes moved from one clock to another, watching the hands as they ticked forward. I could see the thoughts running through her mind. She was holding on to the past, wishing she could change it. But time does not stop for anyone. It does not care about regret or mistakes. It only moves forward. I had seen many people come into my shop, each with their own story. Some wanted new watches, some wanted old ones fixed. But this girl wanted something no one could give her, another chance at yesterday. She let out a deep sigh and looked down at her hands. "Maybe you are right," she said. "Maybe I cannot go back." Her voice was heavy, filled with sadness. "But how do I move forward when the past still follows me?" She looked up at me, searching for an answer. "How do I stop thinking about what I did?" Her fingers curled into a fist, as if she was holding on to something she could not let go of. I thought for a moment, then reached for a small pocket watch on the counter. It was old, its golden cover scratched from years of use. I held it up and showed it to her. "This watch is broken," I said. "The hands do not move anymore. But does that mean time has stopped?" She shook her head. "No," she whispered. I nodded. "Exactly. The watch is stuck, but time still moves. Life still goes on." I placed the watch back on the counter and looked at her. "You can stay stuck in the past, or you can move forward with time." She bit her lip and looked away. I could tell she was thinking about my words. Outside, the world was still moving. People passed by the shop, cars rolled down the street, and the sun sank lower in the sky. Time never waited. It carried everything with it: joy, pain, love, loss. "What if I move forward and it still hurts?" she asked. Her voice was small, almost afraid of the answer. I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. "It will hurt," I said honestly, "but pain is part of life. You cannot change the past, but you can learn from it. You can do better next time. That is what time gives us, a new chance every second." I pointed at the clock on the wall. "Every tick is a new moment. You just have to decide how to use it." She sat there, thinking. Her eyes were no longer full of hope, but they were not full of despair either. There was something else, understanding. She looked at the clocks one more time, listening to their steady rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. Moving forward, never back. The past was gone, but the future was waiting. She just had to take the first step. The girl sat still, her eyes lost in thought. The ticking of the clocks filled the shop, steady and unchanging. She took a slow breath and looked at me again. "You are right," she said. "Time moves forward. But what if I am not ready?" Her voice was quiet, almost afraid. She traced the edge of the wooden counter with her fingers, as if trying to hold on to something solid. "What if I make another mistake? What if I cannot fix what I have done?" She frowned, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. I picked up a small silver watch from the table. The glass was smooth, the hands moving perfectly. "This watch was broken once," I said. "The owner brought it to me, thinking it was useless. But I fixed it. Now it works again." I turned the watch in my hand, letting the light reflect off its surface. It is not the same as before, but it still tells time. It still moves forward. I placed it gently in front of her. "People are the same. We make mistakes. We break. But that does not mean we stop. We fix what we can and keep going." She picked up the watch and held it carefully. Her fingers traced the numbers on its face. The ticking was soft but steady, like a heartbeat. She watched it for a long time, as if trying to understand something hidden inside. Finally, she placed it back on the counter. "Maybe I can fix things," she said. "Maybe it is not too late." She still looked unsure, but there was something different in her voice now, a small spark of belief. I nodded. "It is never too late," I said. "As long as time moves, you have a chance. You may not be able to change the past, but you can change what happens next." I pointed to the clocks on the wall. "They keep moving, and so can you." The shop was quiet, except for the steady ticking. Each second passed, bringing a new moment, a new choice. She looked around the shop, her eyes scanning the watches, the clocks, the tools on my desk. Everything in this place was about time. She took a deep breath and stood up. "Thank you," she said. "I do not know if I can fix everything, but I will try." She gave a small smile, not big, not certain, but real. Then she turned toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she stopped and looked back at me. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" she asked. Her voice was curious now, not sad. I smiled and shook my head. "No," I said, "because every second that passes is a gift, even the hard ones." She nodded slowly, as if understanding for the first time. Then she opened the door and stepped outside. The bell above the door rang, and just like that she was gone. But time, as always, kept moving forward. The door closed behind her, and the shop was quiet again. I sat there for a long time, listening to the steady ticking of the clocks. The girl was gone, but her words stayed with me. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" It was a question I had heard before, but not one I had thought about in a long time. I looked around my shop, at the watches on the shelves and the clocks on the walls. Time was everywhere in this place, yet I had never tried to fight it. I had learned long ago that the past is not a place we can visit. I picked up an old clock from the counter. It was heavy, its wooden frame smooth from years of use. It had stopped working a long time ago, but I had never fixed it. Not because I could not, but because I never felt the need to. Some things, I believed, were meant to stay in the past. I ran my fingers over the glass and watched my reflection in it. The lines on my face were deeper than before, my hair a little greyer. Time had changed me too, just as it changed everything else. I placed the clock back on the counter and stood up. The sun outside was setting, casting a golden light through the window. I walked to the door and looked out. The street was busy, people rushing home, cars moving slowly in the evening traffic. Life outside was always moving, just like time. I wondered if the girl had gone to fix her mistake. I hoped she had, because in the end that was all any of us could do, keep moving forward no matter how heavy the past felt. I turned the sign on my door to closed and stepped back inside. The shop felt different now, though nothing had really changed. The clocks still ticked, the watches still sat in their cases, and my tools were still scattered on the desk. But something in me felt lighter, as if I had let go of something I did not even know I was holding. The past could not be changed, but the future was still waiting. That was enough. As I sat back in my chair, I heard a soft ticking sound. It was the old clock on the counter. For years it had been silent, but now, somehow, it had started ticking again. I smiled. Maybe it was just a coincidence, or maybe, in some strange way, it was a reminder that even broken things can start again. That time does not stop for anyone, but it also never takes away the chance to begin anew. The next morning I opened the shop as usual. The clocks on the wall ticked, the watches in the glass case shone under the light, and the smell of old wood and metal filled the air. Everything was the same, yet I felt different. The girl's visit had left something behind, not a watch, not a broken clock, but a thought, a reminder that time moves forward and we must move with it. I sat behind the counter, fixing a watch with careful hands. The gears inside were small but important. Each one had a purpose. Each one played a role. If even one was broken, the watch would stop. People were the same. We make mistakes, we fall apart, but we also have the power to fix ourselves. The girl had wanted to change the past, but maybe now she understood what matters is what we do next. The bell on the door rang, and a man walked in. He was older, his hands rough from years of work. He placed a watch on the counter and smiled. "It was my father's," he said. "It stopped working years ago, but I never wanted to throw it away." I picked up the watch and turned it over in my hands. It was old, worn, but still beautiful. "Let's see if we can bring it back to life," I said. The man nodded, hope in his eyes. As I worked, I thought about how time connects us all. The girl, the man, the watches, the clocks. We all carry time with us, in memories, in regrets, in hopes. The past may be gone, but the future is always waiting. And as long as time moves forward, so can we. I looked at the clock on the wall. The hands kept ticking, steady and sure. A new second, a new moment, a new chance.